Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This week, we're going to be talking about Chapter 6, Coding Procedures for Diseases of the Blood and Blood-Forming Organs, and the Endocrine System. So those are Chapters 6 and 7. These two chapters, you'll be moving out and branching out into things outside of the medical and surgical section. This will be dealing with administration, monitoring, and some other things that some of you may find new. A lot of these things you can start by finding in the, in the first three letters, which will be given to you in the index. Let's take a quick look at some other things that might be useful for you in this chapter. Some of the things people forget about are things about what is being actually done. And there is a really good appendix, Appendix A, giving you the root operations definition. This will give you the difference between an alteration and a bypass, control versus creation, destruction versus detachment. You'll also note that in addition to the root operations, we have things that are unique to obstetrics, root operations, other procedures that really don't fit into anything, such as phototherapy, shockwave therapy. All these things, if you get stuck, are great places to go to find out exactly what's going on. We have some in Appendix B, which will give you further definitions and clarification on some of the imaging, nuclear medicine, physical rehabilitation and audiology, mental health qualifiers, and then one that somebody has emailed me about is about approaches. So how do we know something is laparoscopic? What exactly does that mean? Your text has some examples, but if you look under percutaneous and endoscopic, this will spell it out. So sometimes they won't explicitly say what it is in terms of the approach, but they'll give you a hint by using terms that refer to a scope. So that would mean typically by, in this case, endoscopically through a puncture, minor incision, through the skin, what have you. Okay, even if they don't come out and explicitly say through a percutaneous endoscopic approach. So some of the codes that we'll see this week will come out of other sections as mentioned. So we'll be outside of the medical surgical section. We'll be getting into things that involve administration, monitoring and measurement. And again, how you find out what section is by trying to look up what exactly these procedures are. And that's all I have for you. Please stop by office hours if you have any questions about this material. We'll see you online. Bye now.